Okay, good evening and welcome to our senior parent night. Congratulations on getting this far in the journey, and hopefully your seniors have had a great first few days of school. My name is Jessica Smedley. I'm the Director of School Counseling here in Hillsborough. And with me here tonight is a fabulous team of professionals who are going to help usher your children through and out of their senior year. We have some new faces. So before we start with a person that most people know really well, Mrs. Thompson, who's been on, and you probably have seen her in some of her other programs. Just want to go around and introduce our whole crew. So we're going to start with Mrs. Housel, and we're going to go in the order of everyone's case load. So you have the last name. They're going to tell you what last names they cover. So Mrs. Housel, you can take it away.
Hi there, I'm Mrs. Housel, and I work with seniors with last names A through B-O-N.
Good evening, I'm Cindy Proval, and I have seniors BOP through DOW.
Hi everyone, I'm Toby Flagg, and I work with seniors from DAO through GAR.
Hi everyone, I'm Nicole Gallagher. I am new to the district and I have students with the last name of GEA through JOG.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jaleesa Williamson. I'm also new to the district. I have seniors with the last name JOH to LO.
Good evening, everyone. I have seniors LUCK through MIZR.
Hello, my name is Ian Projan, and I have seniors MO through Patel.
Hi, my name is Kristen Regetz. I'm also new to the district. I have seniors PATI through SAI.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Jacobson, and I have seniors with the last name SAL to STE.
Hello, everyone. My name is Aziza Hassan. I'm also new to the district, and I have seniors with the last name from STF to Z.
Okay, great. So without further ado, I'm going to turn our program over to Mrs. Thompson.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Thompson. I'm the College and Career Counselor. I guess we could say my caseload is A through Z when it comes to pretty much all of the seniors. So it's going to be a pleasure to work with everyone this year. And we'll be talking about the entire four-year college application process this evening. Some of you, if you attended the sessions in July, may find that some of this is a little bit of repeat, but hopefully you'll get some new stuff, some reinforcing and filling in some of the blanks that you might have about really how this entire process works. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Give me just 2 seconds to do that. And we will be ready to go. So first, we're just going to do a little bit of review, then we'll talk about the main components of the application, then put it all together into what the process looks like for our HHS students. Finish out at the end. What we'll do is we will have you go off into separate breakout rooms on Google Meet. We did send those links out today. You'll go out by counselor so that you have a bit of a smaller group for Q&A. We can also take Q&A during this session. When you're on Zoom, on the bottom of your screen, you'll see a link for Q&A, so you can ask a question. We'll try to answer it. If it doesn't get answered here, then a better place might be in that smaller group setting, and since we'll be on Google Meet, you'll be able to just kind of speak if that's what you prefer to do instead of typing. So before we really get started, I wanted to talk about a couple of opportunities so that you know what's going on. We are very, very excited to be resuming our college representative visits to Hillsborough High School. So we have not done these visits in person since before COVID, so it's been 3 years for us. So I realized that our seniors have no idea what any of this really even is. So basically what happens is that over 90 and an ever-growing list of colleges will be coming here to Hillsborough during the school day. So they've made an appointment where they come at a certain day and during a certain period. Students may sign up to attend those visits. Sometimes they are as small as one student and the admissions representative and one of our HHS counselors, but they may be as large as 80 or 90 students as well. Usually they fall kind of somewhere in the middle. And what they're doing is they're going to talk about the university. It's an opportunity for students to ask questions. We do limit the number of visits that students may attend. So for seniors, that number is 7. So I would say the best sort of bang for your buck with those 7 visits is to maybe look at some of the schools that are on your list for sure that you haven't had the opportunity to visit, and especially schools that might count demonstrated interest. So those would be good ones to take. Also, schools that you're kind of sketchy about, you're not really sure if they're going to wind up on your list, those are good ones to attend visits for. And for those students who really are like, what is this list she's even talking about? I have no list. These are a really great opportunity for you. So if you're on this call and you feel like you are really behind the 8 ball, you don't have a list, you haven't really done visits, these are a great way to kind of get out there and start seeing things and start building that list. So for those students, I definitely encourage, if you're not sure which schools to attend, reach out to me and reach out to your counselor. We can maybe give you a couple tips about like, hey, I think it would be a good idea if you registered for these few, that would get you started. And oftentimes we find that really can get the ball rolling with students. So registration is open for these now. Students can just log into their score. In the top right corner, there's a link. There's the menus, those 3 bars. And you just go to events and deadlines and they're all listed right there. Click register on 7 of them. So we encourage students to attend those. Also coming up, we've got our financial aid night on Tuesday, September 20th. It's the same presenter we had last year. So if anybody attended one of our sessions last year, Kristen Isaacson is fabulous. She's really good at putting things in, I would say, terminology that you can understand, even if this is your first time going through the process. So I'd encourage families to attend that as well. She really steps through the entire FAFSA with you, and she's great at addressing some of the sort of like special circumstancy kind of stuff. She's good at addressing that stuff and telling you what to do about investments, or what if I've got a 529, but it's in my other kid's name. She answers all those kinds of questions so that you know what to do when it becomes FAFSA time. So now jumping off into the application process. So just to review, we've got 2 types of colleges when we talk about traditional colleges. We've got our 2-year schools and our 4-year schools. Going to make it real easy for those students who are on here, families, and you know that your child or students that you are only applying to 2-year school, you're only applying to RVCC or another 2-year school. The left column is really what we're talking about. So that application process is a little bit further on. Typically, we recommend students apply in February. We actually do an application day right here at Hillsborough for our students that are applying to RVCC. So that's a great way to get started. RVCC and the other 2-year schools, they don't look for a transcript until after graduation. SAT scores and ACT scores aren't required, but if you did take them, they can be used to determine placement, so you perhaps don't need to take placement tests. No letters of recommendation are required. So really, all the stuff we're going to talk about for the rest of this, if you know that you are looking at RVCC and that's where you intend to start, you don't have to worry about all the rest of the things that are on here. And we will take you through the process when we get to the spring. So don't think we're ignoring you if that's your plan. We're just kind of working with what's coming up at us first, which is those folks with October 15th deadlines. The one exception is for students who are applying to the RVCC Honors College. That is a little bit more like the typical 4-year college application process. It does include an essay, a separate application. There's also 2 letters of recommendation required. So if you are applying to RVCC Honors, not a bad idea to tune into the rest of this, because a lot of these things are going to pertain to you. Now, shifting gears to our 4-year friends. The application deadlines really vary. The first deadline that is out there is October 15th. The 2 schools that are big for October 15th for us, we've got University of Georgia and also University of Chapel Hill's early action deadline is October 15th. So that comes up first. A big bulk of our students hit the next deadline, which is November 1st. That is kind of the craziest time, well, except this week, I guess, for our school counselors. They're super busy leading up to that November 1st deadline. For these, this is where students applying, we're sending out information from the high school, and then the student is sending out information as well. So we're going to go over all of those different parts of that application so that you understand what you need to do, what it is that we're doing, and kind of how that all happens, how everything really gets put together at the other end. The other thing is when we're talking about four-year schools, we've got different deadline systems. So we've got early decision, we've got early action, and we've got regular or rolling. So the first things that come up are really the early decision and early action deadlines. The early decision is the binding one. Early action is not binding. One thing I want to just kind of throw out there right now is that I know students, some students feel like everybody is applying ED, and that is definitely not the case. Less than 10% of our students are applying early decision. If you don't have a clear first choice where you can define exactly why you're applying to that school and why you're a fantastic fit for that school, ED is probably not the right fit for you, and EA is going to really maximize your, chances there. The deadlines for early decision and early action really range from anywhere from October 15th all the way up until like December 15th. It depends upon the school, but that's the kind of time frame we're talking about. For regular decision, those deadlines really range for the most part from about December 1st through to February 1st, or some schools continue to accept students after that, and that tends to be those rolling schools. So moving on to the parts of the application. First things first, you've probably heard me talk about this before. You really got to get organized heading into this, because what you're going to find is that each school that you're looking at is going to have different requirements in terms of what they want from you and how they want those things submitted. For the most part, everything is going to come from us here at Hillsborough in the way of letters of recommendation, things like that. We send them all through SCORE. It's pretty seamless as far as you're concerned. But if a student is doing any kind of special application, like applying to a combined medical degree program, or sometimes if they're applying to a specialized arts program, they might require different letters of recommendation to come, directly from the recommender, and have to go through a certain system to do that. So you kind of got to keep track of all of those requirements and when things are due. I do have, and it's in a lot of my resources, it'll be in my follow-up email, a spreadsheet that you can use to start getting yourself organized. If you don't have anything, you're welcome to use mine and modify it. The first thing we're talking about when we have kind of the application process is the application itself, right? So that is where the student's filling in all of their demographic information, their high school of attendance, the classes that they're taking this year, etc. Most of our students will complete the common application. That's accepted by more than 800 schools. I do encourage students to kind of head in that direction. While it can be overwhelming at first, I do think that it kind of gets the biggest bang for your buck in terms of application completion. What I really recommend is for students to do that organizing work first, so that you can figure out which of your schools accept which applications and really minimize your work effort in terms of completing the easy stuff. Like, you don't need to put in your name and address on 8 different application forms. We want to eliminate that and bring that really down to as small a number as we can. One thing that is important to know is that Common App does have a hard limit of 20 schools that you can apply to on the Common App. So for our students, and some of you are like, oh my God, 20 schools, that's crazy, I can't do that. But we do have some students probably who are on this call that have more than 20. You want to do that organizing work first, so that you know which of your schools you're going to use a different application for. This year, there is an application right within SCORE. I'm going to be very transparent and say I am not super duper familiar. I've already done some clicking through. I know how it's laid out, but no one's used it yet. So we haven't kind of seen the other end of that process. The old coalition application that used to be out there no longer exists, and many of those schools are the schools that are accepting the SCORE application, but not all. Some have gone over to the Common App. Some are using their school-specific applications. There are some state application systems. So students who are applying to the California Publics, the Cal States, that is a university-wide application system, and you select which of the schools you want to apply to within it. Regrettably, you do have to pay for each and every one of them. So that's $75 per UC in terms of an application fee, but you only have to complete the application itself once. And then some schools have their own application too. The biggest, most important thing I would say is really the academic record of the student. So that comes from one of two things. There's either the high school transcript, and that is, typically an official transcript that is sent directly from us here at Hillsborough to the school that you're applying to, and it goes out via SCORE. If you log into your Genesis and you go to the transcript tab, that's what we're sending. And don't get worried, you see it says unofficial The only change between what you're seeing and what we send is the one that we send doesn't say unofficial, and it has a special seal and signature on it. So that's the only difference with what's going out. You'll see that it does include both an unweighted and a weighted GPA. I know I've gotten a lot of questions in recent weeks about the 4.0 scale and what's my 4.0 GPA. And while you might be helpful for you to have that in terms of kind of knowing where you stand for a school, when you apply to the schools, you should not be putting anything about a 4.0 GPA on that application, because that is not our grading scale. You're going to be using our 100 point plus GPA on your applications throughout the entire process. So typically, as I mentioned, official transcripts are sent by the school counselor. But like most things college admissions, there's kind of a big it depends, because there are many schools out there that are no longer requiring that transcript. What they're requiring is that students self-report their grades. So what happens is a student is going to enter each and every course that they've taken over their 4 years, each grade that they've gotten, how many credits that course is, etc. The easiest way to do that is to go into Genesis, pull up that unofficial transcript and use that as the student is completing the self-reported academic records. I usually recommend that students, if they can, go ahead and print their transcript. I think it's a little bit easier to work off of a piece of paper and looking up at the screen sometimes than it is kind of toggling back and forth between two tabs to do the entire SRAR. I find it goes a little bit faster also when you can kind of like check off what you've done. You don't lose track so much. As I mentioned, those community colleges are only going to look at that transcript after graduation. This is a quick view of some of the schools out there that are looking at self-reported grades. So I would say the big systems that are out there for self-reporting grades is there's the SRAR system and the SSAR system. So SSAR has historically been for the Florida publics. That has blessedly merged within the SRAR system this year. So students are going to have there's one SRAR that a student fills out, and the bulk of that info would get copied to each of these other schools. So it's common, for instance, for our students to apply to Rutgers, of course, to also apply to Penn State, to also apply to University of Delaware, and also apply to Pitt. That is probably like the most common for overlap schools for our students. The good news is that once a student does that Rutgers SRAR, all they need to do for the other schools is they need to log into the school specific one. What they're going to find is that all of the information that they put in their Rutgers SRAR is already there in front of them. They're going to need to click through and link it to their Penn State application, click through and link it to their Pitt application, etc. But they're not going to have to retype in all of those courses and grades throughout. A couple of the schools will throw in maybe one extra question, one extra screen. So I always recommend students click through the whole thing and just take a good gander at it, make sure it looks correct before they submit at the end. So for instance, University of Delaware throws in an opportunity for students to self-report their test scores within their SRAR as well. So it might be slight differences, but no more having to retype those grade 9 grades. Completely separate, we have the courses and grades section within the Common App. There are, a number of schools that do require that. My best recommendation for students is that when they start that Common App, immediately add the schools that they plan to use the Common App for to the Common App, so that as they're going through the Common App, it will be able to tell them which sections of the application are required. So if they've done all that work up front, they'll know I do or don't need to do the courses and grades section. When students wait until say October 31st or November 1st in the morning to add some of these schools, and I've had students do this, they add, say, Purdue, at 4 o'clock on the 1st, and they want to get it in that night, and then, they're working through it, and all of a sudden they realize that they need to do the entire courses and grades section for Purdue, and that, oops, Purdue also has several essay supplements that they didn't know about. So that's another good reason to make sure that you get all those schools on there early so that you know what's coming. Still, other schools have to be different, and they have school-specific reporting requirements. So Temple is a big one for our students. They use kind of a homegrown system on their website. University of California requires that students self-report, and that one is entirely different. And for students applying to the University of California, when it's on your list and score, by the time we get to sometime in mid-October, I send out some specifics to you about completing that University of California application. But you can see there's some other schools as well. One of the first ones coming up, University of South Carolina, that October 15th deadline, they do allow you to upload an unofficial transcript right within the application. And when a school requires that, you can just download it right from Genesis and upload it right to the school. Just a quick idea of this is what I'm talking about when I talk about self-reporting grades. This is the kind of thing that a student is entering. And again, they're using that grade that is right on the transcript. A 94 is what the student actually earned. It's not like applying any weighting or anything to it because it's in an honors course, but you see you designate honors separately. So you're working right off that transcript. Next up, I alluded to standardized testing. We've talked a lot in the different sessions about test optional, test blind, what those different things are. A reminder that the UC schools and the Cal State schools and a few others are test blind. That means that they do not consider scores at all. You can't submit them. They don't want them. They won't look at them for admission. Most schools out there are test optional, but there are a couple more who have added on to the test required list. I think since we last really talked about this late last year, I would say the additions, MIT is requiring tests, but I think one that it would affect more students, University of Tennessee, we've had an increasing number of applicants to there in the last few years. They are a test required school this year. Purdue is tests preferred, and that's another popular school for us. So you can apply test optional there, but if you've taken them, they really would prefer to see your scores if you apply to that school. For those that are still testing, you've got our dates right here. So right now we're really in the land of registering for the October test. If you're wanting to do that, we're in the late registration period if you want to add on, and then really kind of November, December, and that's really the end of the road in terms of testing for students from your year. One thing to really check is that some schools out there, let's talk about our November 1st deadlines. Some schools will accept test scores that were taken on that November 5th test date, and other schools won't. So it's important to know what the deal is there. You also have to kind of be real quick. If you're taking that October test and you have a November 1st deadline, you have to have really a plan for how you're going to report those scores to the schools. What'll happen is you won't get those scores back until, a little past mid-month. And so you're running kind of close to those deadlines. And so you're going to have to think about how you're going to report those scores, what numbers you're going to report, because you're going to have to make a decision pretty quickly in order to send them out, because it's your responsibility to submit your scores. That's not something we do, which works out great during test optional, right? Because the ball lies totally in your court. We're not sending them out, so nobody's going to accidentally get them. It's whatever you do. There are many schools out there that require that scores come directly from the testing service. And the downside of that is that it takes like 2 to 3 weeks for those scores to get there. And I know that that seems illogical because it's electronic and I could click a button and send it from here to there. But the reality is, it takes some time to get out from the Common App, and then it takes time to get received by the school, and also to get loaded into their system as well. We recommend that students order those scores at least 2 weeks before the deadline. So remember, I just said for October, you're kind of cutting it close, and that's because those scores aren't available until mid-October, and you've got to turn around and send them out right away if you need to hit your November 1st school requires official scores and you want to send them. Because there are some schools out there that require that everything is received by that deadline. And when I say that, I'm talking about Rutgers requires them to be received by then. University of Maryland requires that they actually be received by that deadline. University of Virginia, and most definitely University of Michigan, some of our very popular ones that are hardcore about things need to be in their office by November 1st, by the end of the day on November 1st, just to be clear. So you do have to kind of pre-plan for that and back up your timeline to make sure you get things out on time. There are other schools, though, that are now allowing self-reporting of SAT scores. Why do I like this? One, because you don't have to give the College Board more money, and I am very happy to not give them any more of your money. So self-reporting is great. But also that means that you have more control over the fact that it's actually getting there, and you don't have that anxiety piece of, did they go out from the College Board? Did the school receive it? How come it's not posted in my student status site yet? Because you're actually doing the reporting. So that's one reason that I actually like it, because I feel like it gives you a little bit more control over things. Depending on the school, though, you do report it in different places. So many just take it right off the Common App, but others do require that you go to a special place, maybe on their status site or within the SRAR to report it. One important one, UNC Chapel Hill, I mentioned it because it's the first deadline. No matter what you do, they require that you self-report your scores. And so if you're submitting them, if you're not applying test optional. So you need to go into their website after you apply. What's really important is that means you really, really, really need to watch your emails, students, because once you apply to the school, they're going to let you know if there are any more steps that you need to take. And there are schools that have other steps, and I do not have an exhaustive list of what those schools are. So you have to be responsible for checking that email, checking your application status on school websites, etc., to make sure you do anything that's required after the initial application is in. Letters of recommendation. We've got that counselor letter of recommendation. We've got teacher letters of recommendation. Sometimes they're required by schools. Sometimes they're not even accepted by schools. It really varies, and you need to follow the directions for that specific school. So if a school says that they want to, you're sending them 2. You are not sending them 3, 4, 5, or 6 because they don't want them. And when you do that, it makes it look like you don't follow directions. So you want to provide them what they're asking for. There are other schools out there that do not accept letters of recommendation at all. Rutgers, Penn State, Pitt, West Virginia, none of them accept letters of recommendation. University of South Carolina only accepts them for applicants to the Honors College. So even if you have them, we can't send them. Because they don't want them. Students, for those teacher letters of recommendation, hopefully most students have already asked their teachers in some way for those letters of recommendation. Once they say yes, you are going to go into your SCORE account and you are going to request the letter. Students, the easiest way to get there is to go to the My Colleges screen within SCORE, and right above the table of all your schools is where you're going to see an application documents button. You click on that and that's where you request your letters. It has, I am working with a handful of students who have requests or have agreements from teachers who are currently out on leave to write letters of recommendation, who were not able to add them in SCORE. If you're kind of stuck in that scenario that like, Mr. Jones or Ms. Rao or someone said they'd write a letter for you and you didn't put it in SCORE yet, great idea to shoot me an email so that I'm aware of it. We're working on getting those requests that are within, to go up within SCORE. Because they're on leave, they're inactive. And so we're kind of working through some of the details about that. This is our second year using SCORE. So every time we're kind of finding a couple more things situations that we maybe didn't run into last year that are an issue this year. And that's one of the ones that we're running into right now. It's really important that students be patient. Remember that whether it's the counselor or whether it is the teachers, our goal is to get everybody's stuff in on time. So what we're all doing really is that we're working in order of students and their first deadlines. We can see exactly what those deadlines are if you put your information in SCORE correctly. Do not tell us your deadline is earlier than it is. We know when the deadlines are, so don't tell me a deadline is October 15th for Rutgers because I know it's not. So please be honest with us as well when you're talking to us about when those deadlines are. You don't have to give us a buffer. You know, we're planning ahead for all of our students. So one thing, don't get panicked as we get close to November 1st. And I'll be very honest, we have a huge number of students who are applying to November 1st schools. Everybody in this building is acutely aware of what they need to do in terms of getting those letters of recommendation done. The reality is that yes, someone's is going to be written first and it might be done on October 3rd, and someone's is going to be written last, and that might be on November 1st, but we're going to get them all at the door for November 1st. And that's, you know, the number that the date that, you know, we're trying to reach for each of those students. Now, counselor letters. Let's address the elephant in the room. We heard lots of people say I'm new to the district when they introduced themselves today. Rest assured, I've spent a lot of time with these 4 in the last week and a half or so. I feel like we've all been living here. I've gotten to know them all pretty well already. I'm very confident in their ability to write outstanding letters of recommendation for you. Just as your previous counselor would have done, they're going to use some pieces of information. And this is how you can really help yourself, right? Is making sure that you do the best job you can in getting them these pieces of information. then they're going to kind of fill in some blanks as well. So you're going to do that student brag sheet survey. If you haven't done it, students, that is something to get working on, and get that done as soon as possible. That would be a great weekend goal, because that's a one and done. Once it's done, you don't have to look at it again. But please be descriptive in there. Please provide your counselor with additional info. If you already submitted yours last year and now you're looking at it, we can't reopen it for you, but if you're looking at it and you're like, now that I have a new counselor, I really wish I said these other things, go ahead and start jotting that stuff down and pulling it together into like an email, because you can email that to them and they can kind of append it on their side so that when they sit down to write your letter, they have that additional information. We've also got that parent point of view survey also found within SCORE. That's also used within student letters of recommendation. The teacher to counselor feedback form. So that was the bit where you asked 2 other teachers who are not writing letters for you to provide some feedback to your counselor. If you didn't do that last year, now is a great time. And that's especially going to be helpful for some of those new counselors that we have on staff. Your activity resume and SCORE right there on that profile page, they're using that too. And finally, they can meet with you. And you can meet with them. And so that's an opportunity for them to really fill in a lot of the blanks. I know, we've talked a lot about what our time frame is going to be on things this fall. We're planning on really kicking off with kind of a group thing with our students. So, parents, if your kid's not sitting there with you, they're going to hear a lot of this stuff and maybe, different words, because it's not going to be me, over the next 2 weeks as they meet in groups. And once they get through that, then they're going to be able to turn to start moving towards doing some individual meetings. And depending on how students know their counselor, something like that may or may not be necessary, depending on where students applying, maybe not necessary. If a student's like, I got a GPA that's like a 98 and I'm applying to Rutgers, they're probably going to be good. They're not going to need a letter of recommendation. If they don't want to meet, no one's going to make you meet. But for our other students, that could be helpful for them. And I know our new counselors are really excited about, they've been meeting a ton of people in the last 3 days, but they're really excited about spending some time with their seniors and writing your letters. All of those things, those surveys, those most forms, they have to be done at least 2 weeks before your first deadline. But I'll be honest, the sooner the better. Right now they are all dug very, very deep in scheduling still, and scheduling change requests. Will continue those for through Tuesday is the add drop deadline. There'll be some more of them later this month, but what they like to be able to do is when they have a very momentary lull, start organizing themselves, start organizing their workloads, and potentially start writing letters for students who have some of the earlier deadlines. So if your stuff is in, then you're going to be sooner to the top of the pile. If they get to you and your stuff isn't there, we're moving on to the next person and you're getting bumped down in the pile. So you want to make sure that you've done what you need to do. Essays, changing gear a little bit. This is on students, right? So students had the opportunity to take a crack at a college essay last year in junior English classes. Hopefully many students worked on those over the summer, but I know there's a lot of students who have not touched it since June, and that's okay. We'll get you there. Remember that, we're looking for something that is the student's own work written in the student's voice. We all know when a 45-year-old woman wrote the essay, it's very apparent to us all. So parents really, a good thing to do here is read it over, provide feedback. But remember also the essay has changed very much from the days of when we all applied to college. So it's no longer really a main essay about why I really want to go to this college. That's not what it is. What it is, it's really much more of a story about the student and what's important to them and what they bring to the table. And that might be different from others perhaps, and get the admission counselor really doing their best to kind of get the students, get to know who the student really is, not so much what they've done. What they've done, what we want to say as adults is like, how come you're not telling them about these, activities that you did so much and you should write about those for their essay. But the reality is all of those things have also been talked about in the activities section of the application. So again, the essay is more about who they are, not so much what they've done. So that's kind of a hard hurdle for those of us who are from a different generation to get over. Students, I really recommend having someone else read it over, teacher, friends, your school counselor, college counselor, me. If you have, independent, you're probably working with them already on your essay. That's great. One of my great final tips for students is to read it when you're kind of making those final edits and you think you're done, read it aloud. That is the easiest way to tighten up the wording, to really improve the sound of the entire piece that you have, and it'll kind of elevate it from here to here, even just by doing that. There's some great resources out there through College Essay Guide. They're free. They're fabulous. I really recommend them. I do review essays. What I have found is easiest for me to try to do is for students to Google Doc share it with me with editing rights. Couple of ground rules on it. When you share it with me, you need to leave at least a week for me to get to it to get you feedback. So that means that really once we hit like October 20th or so, like that'll be the end of the road for November 1st, because I know I won't be able to get through them all to provide the feedback. So it's just one thing that I'm doing among many, obviously. I will tell you there's almost always a line. I keep an electronic post-it note right on my computer where I indicate when I received it from the student, and I just keep them in order. Students, I'm not going to read everything you write. So what I mean by that is that I can read your main Common App essay, and I can really kind of comfortably say I can probably read like 1 or 2 supplements for, a student as well. What I can't read, like kids who've got like 25 supplements, I can't read all 25 for you. That's not going to happen. I can't provide that amount of feedback just for one student. So really keep it towards that main Common App essay, and then maybe 1 or 2 supplements that you feel like are probably some of the ones that you'll use the most often, that you want me to take a look at and see if you're on the right track. I'll start accepting those right away. I don't envision myself really getting feedback to anybody until maybe end of next week. Is it going to take me a little bit of time to get rolling because we've got some other things that are happening over the next week or so. Other information, AP scores. People have asked me how you report those. Right on the application. Right on the Common App, it's right on the testing tab. You can report AP scores and not report SAT scores. That's okay, you can do that. The only school I know of that likes to have official scores would be our friends at Georgetown. So for those applying to Georgetown, this isn't a surprise, right? They've got a lot of funky things that just they do. But Georgetown does want official ones if you want them to be considered in the application process. And there's nowhere to self-report those on the Georgetown app unless they made any unexpected changes to their application this year. Your activities and awards, you're going to put those right on your application. On Common App, we've got the sections, that awards section on the education tab, and we've got the 10 activity spaces on the activities tab there. What about a resume? Do I recommend students put together a resume? Sure. It can be helpful, if not here, somewhere else in the process. Perhaps if you're doing an interview, resumes maybe wind up being used in a scholarship process. Some schools will accept a resume. Should everyone submit one? No. If your resume is a differently formatted activities list, it's not going to be helpful for you. So who it's really helpful for is students who have a lot more to expand upon than they were realistically able to put in their activities section. Perhaps they had to cut off a bunch of things. Perhaps they're super involved in activities that take explanation that they really don't feel like they were adequately able to explain on the application. Resume is helpful for them. Those students who have research experience that they really weren't able to depict in the limited characters of the activity section, that's who the resume is really great for. Other students, it's not going to count against you if you don't do it. They have another way to see your information, and believe me, they will appreciate not rereading the same information twice. Outside letters of recommendation. I've gotten some questions about those lately. Note that only some schools accept outside letters of recommendation. Many schools say we want 2 academic letters from people who had you in the classroom, period. And that's it. And they won't accept outside letters. Other schools will. You can tell on the Common App which schools will accept outside letters of recommendation. If you are on the school's page on the Common App, you can read there and they show the admission requirements. If you've already added it to My Colleges, you can go to the recommenders and FERPA page there, scroll down and see how many other, they call it other, recommendations are accepted. And that'll tell you if you can submit anything. If you're getting someone from outside of here who doesn't teach here, doesn't work here, et cetera, to write a letter for you, maybe like a coach from outside of here, a clergyman, something like that. The best route is really to request those through the common application. If you're applying through other applications, you can work with your counselor on how to get those things in. Portfolios, auditions, those of you applying to different types of programs that require those things, there's no common method. Every school does their own thing. They've got school-specific guidelines. They also typically have school-specific deadlines. So for those of you who might be thinking of things like musical theater, et cetera, you really, and anything that says like BFA, really pay attention to the special deadlines. They may have earlier deadlines, like a pre-screen deadline, like Syracuse. It's got to be in, I think it's November 1st, is their pre-screen deadline, even though the regular admission deadline is until January. So you got to pay attention there. Some of the schools require that you request your recommenders in a separate system, like I think it's like Accepted, and there's a couple other ones that you request the recommendation right there, and the teacher will need to go and complete the recommendation in that system. So you really need to pay attention to those deadlines. Other special programs are accelerated med program friends. Some of those programs also require a direct letter of recommendation like that. So when a school absolutely requires that, and there's no way around it, they don't take them from SCORE because it has to be submitted directly through that program, you need to be sure that you communicate directly to those recommenders that they're going to get that invite. Because I'll tell you where it usually goes is the promotions or spam folder. And if I don't know it's coming, I don't know I need to be looking for it. So it's important to give them a heads up that like, hey, I went in last night, I did that Rutgers Newark BAMD application and I requested you, can you look out for that recommendation invite so that they know they need to go in. And also to remind them that like, yeah, this is one that's outside the process. We know it's outside the process. My counselor knows, yes, you should do it. So that they know that they need to do something beyond what they would normally do. Because what they normally do as teachers is to just upload it to SCORE and then not think about it anymore. So this is a difference from the process for them. Parents, guardians, other caregivers, another thing you all might be more especially interested in is financial aid application deadlines. When can you do stuff? When is stuff due? So some good work for you all to do right now as the student is really working on that application is to do some homework about what is required in the way of financial aid for applications and when it is due based upon how the student is applying to the school. So we've got FAFSA, which we've probably heard about, that opens up October 1st, and it is used by most schools. Then we've got a CSS profile, also opens October 1st. It is hosted by our friends at the College Board. It's used by a smaller number of schools, mostly more selective, mostly private. There are a few hangers-on out there who have school-specific forms. Princeton is one of them. You might see the word IDOC at some point, and you're never going to remember what this is, but hopefully you remember I mentioned it to you, and then you remember to come ask. Some schools will also require you to, after you do these applications, somewhere down the road, also upload all kinds of specific documentation like W-2s, tax forms, like every page of them, things like that through a system called IDOC, also part of our friends at the College Board. Need to look at the deadlines because they really do vary by school and decision plans. So for instance, Drexel, that's very popular for our students. They have a FAFSA and CSS profile deadline that is specific for students who are applying early decision and early action. I think it's November 15th. Whereas students who are applying regular decision, that financial aid deadline is until later on. Especially for early decision, it's very common for there to be a financial aid application deadline that's either the same day as the application deadline, so maybe also November 1st, or maybe about 2 weeks after. So it does come up rather quickly. That being said, you see these things open up on October 1st, and sometimes I feel like people are like waiting at their computer for 12:01 a.m. on October 1st to hit so they can start doing it. There is no cookie for anybody who gets their application done by 8 a.m. on the 1st. It is also October 1st is, I would say, the day that the FAFSA crashes the most, the day that causes the most frustration. So get yourself moving in sometime in early October is great, or throughout the month of October. But again, make sure you're hitting the deadlines, make sure you're doing things correctly. Don't rush to get it done. No prize for getting it done on the first or second, regrettably. And again, that financial aid night program is coming up. I've got a whole list of these resources here that you'll be able to access when I send out my follow-up email. You're going to have it in there. One thing that is probably going to be the friend of many students, and we're going to give it out as well. I think I can't open it. Here we go. Is our senior checklist. We're going to give you a paper copy when you come to group. And I think a lot of students found this really helpful last year, which is basically a physical list of all the little steps that you need to do. And it can be really helpful and make you feel like you're making a heck of a lot of progress when you start checking things off. So what I love to do is when I meet with students in November, I'll be like, hey, I noticed you haven't applied to any schools. There's no schools on your list. Like, what's your plan? Sometimes the kid's like, I'm honestly so overwhelmed, I don't even know where to start. We pull this out. They sit with me for 20 minutes and we cross off like 7 things off the list, and they walk out saying like, I wish I knew that it wasn't that big of a deal after all. So this gives you a real sense of accomplishment, students, to be working off of it that way. All right. So now kind of putting it all together, the process. You need to follow the directions that we set for you, first of all. So students who try to hoe their own road, go their own way, you will find that you'll be the one that this doesn't work out for, because we've got our process to get, 75% of 600 kids, so whatever that is, 450 kids through the 4-year application process. We know what works for us to get everybody's stuff out on side. When you're kind of like doing your own thing over there, trying to avoid using SCORE, you know what's happening. We're not sending anything out for you. And you're the one whose deadline will miss because we had no clue that you had a deadline because you didn't follow a process. You tried to do your own thing. So you got to do what we're telling you to do in the way that we're telling you to do it. So some things to do right now if you haven't already done them. One, and these are some easy things. Go into Genesis, go into the parent account, look at the forms. And if you can't get into your parent account, that's probably why. There's a form in there that's a transcript release form, asking if you consent to release the transcript and where you consent to release it. You want to put that in, you want to grant that so that then we can send the student's transcript wherever you request it without having to come back to you at each and every time and saying like, hey, can we actually send it here, parent? So you do that, blanket, it covers you, but it's a one and done. Once you've done it, you're covered. If you realize now that you did not grant access and you wish you did, you can go back in and you can edit it and resave it, and we'll get the new updates. Students, you also need to complete your FERPA waiver in SCORE. So FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. There will not be a quiz on that later. What it talks about essentially, and you'll see this in Common App as well, so you have to do it in 2 places, is whether or not you'll be able to see the letters of recommendation that were written about you at the school you go to if they keep those records. Why are they asking you this? It's legalese. But colleges prefer to know that the information there is going to remain confidential. They would prefer to see a student grant the waiver, which is to say like, yeah, I'm cool with the fact that I'm not going to go into the Drexel admissions office in November after I get there and ask to see the file. Because when you grant a waiver, the thought is that that person is able to be more authentic in their writing about you. And, it's a more honest letter. That being said, should you be worried that someone's going to write a poor letter of you? I'm going to tell you that everybody is stretched really thin. There is not a teacher out there who is going to be willing to spend an hour of their time to write a poor letter of recommendation to torpedo your chances in the future. If they don't feel like they can write you a strong letter of recommendation, they're going to say, I think it would be better if you asked someone else. I don't feel comfortable writing your letter of recommendation. If they say that, students, they're saying no. They're trying to be kind in the way they say no because they don't think they can do justice for you. They think maybe there's somebody else out there who would be able to speak, in a more positive, glowing way about you. So if someone tells you that, then move on and ask somebody else. If you're having problems coming up with somebody else, come and talk to one of us and we'll help you come up with somebody else who would be a good letter writer for you. So that FERPA waiver is really easy to find. It is right in SCORE. So when students, if you haven't done it, when you log into SCORE, if you're seeing this box, you're probably just blowing it off every time because that's what I do. And you're just going up here. But if you hit get started, you can just do it right there. And all you have to do is save it. If you realize that you already blew past it, when you're on my profile, it's right here in this FERPA section. And again, that's a one and done thing. Once it's done, you don't have to go back and do it, and it's all taken care of, and we don't have to nag you about it anymore. Get those colleges on the applying list in SCORE. That is the biggest thing that will hold you up in the process, and let me tell you why. When I look at a student's applying students list in SCORE, and let me pull mine up here. I've got my colleges. I see I've got these applying things right here. And when I put each of these schools here, it asks me how I want to apply by early action, regular decision, et cetera. It's got deadlines there. These deadlines come to us, right? So I see this and I'm looking at it and it's nicely ordered for me by deadline. And I see, okay, they're applying to Rutgers. I don't got to write a letter for Rutgers. All right, this one's on my radar screen for December 1st. That's when I'm going to write their letter of recommendation for, because that's their soonest deadline. The teachers are seeing that same information. So that's how they're also structuring their work. So you want to take some time to get your schools, each and every one of the ones you're applying to, in that applying column with the correct plan that you're applying to apply. If you're kind of like on the fence, like, I don't know if I'm going to make it to apply to UNC Chapel Hill by October 15th, but you think there's a chance you might, then go ahead and put it on here for October 15th. Because if you can get it done and we can get your stuff done, we'll be happy to do that for you. And frankly, get some work off our plates, right? Because once it's done, we don't have to go back and do it either. But you want to get them on here. Now, we can only see, when we talk about deadlines, we're really only seeing this stuff and applying and applied. So all you students out there who've got like 35 schools on following and nothing's moving over to applying or applied, I'm going to tell you, you're not on anyone's radar in terms of letters of recommendation, because as far as we're concerned, you're not applying anywhere. You don't have any deadlines. We're not touching your letter. So you got to make sure you get those schools on there. This is the time, like these first 2 weeks in September, super helpful to get that stuff in there. Might some things change? Yes. Might you get to October 28th and you had a super ambitious list of 8 early actions and you realize that that's crazy talk and you're not going to do that? Yeah, no big deal. But, you know, we've still got your letter done. We're ready to go. And if you add something else on instead at the last minute, we can get it out. And it's not a big deal for us. So that is something that's super important to be doing now. Another thing, if you haven't already done it, do that activities section in SCORE. It's right off the profile page. So get those 2 other teachers, those teacher to counselor feedback forms. You're basically just giving them a link and saying like, hey, can you fill this out? And so it goes to my counselor. They need some more info for their letter of recommendation. If you haven't done the brag sheet, get that done. Parents, that parent point of view, and then put those teacher letter of recommendation requests in SCORE. A lot of this list looks really familiar, right? I feel like I've been nagging you about this stuff since June, so there's nothing new here. But I would say, you know, number 3 right now is the thing that I would say is taking on a huge piece of importance, along with number 7. Getting those teacher letter of requests in the system so that people can start moving and start working. And everything on that list is like one and done. Once you've done it, you don't have to worry about it again. So it's the basic overview of how things actually work. Let me put it together for you. You're adding your schools to your applying list. I just nagged at you that you need to do it, and you're going to tell me how you're applying to each of them. Then the next thing you really need to be doing is looking at which of your schools you're going to send scores to. And if they need official scores, going in and requesting those on the College Board site. Because remember, I said you need that like 2 to 3 week buffer of time to make sure that that gets to the schools. It is okay and expected that you are going to request those things before you submit your application. No big deal if it gets to the college before you. Basically, the first thing that gets there starts your file at the school, and that is often SAT scores. So that'll start your record there. And then as they get the other pieces, they're going to add that to that no longer physical file, but electronic file at the school. Students, if you are applying early decision, you're going to also make sure that you complete your early decision form in both the Common App and in SCORE. So that needs to be done a little bit early because we've got a special thing we need to do to click and submit that for you. Same thing with fee waivers. Make sure those are taken care of. You're going to work on your online application. You're going to get it done. You're going to ideally get it done before the deadline. I recommend the students build in a buffer for yourself. Most frequent times remember I said FAFSA, most frequent times that goes down is October 1st. Most frequent times the Common App goes down November 1st, December 1st, January 1st, 2nd, 3rd. The end of the day, you will see it'll look like trying to get in Genesis when it's really slow and the little wheel goes around and around and around. That's what the Common App looks like. And you don't want to put that stress on yourself if you can avoid it. So I recommend trying to get it in early, even if it's the earlier in the day on that due day. Like, don't ride that 11:59 p.m. deadline too hard. Students, once you have applied, you're going to go ahead and move that school over to the applied list and score. Your counselor gets a little notification that, hey, so-and-so has submitted their application. They've been getting them. They're saving them in little folders right now. They've been getting them. Students, you may then need to submit self-reported grades through some other system like the SRAR or something like that after you apply. So make sure you follow up on those things. Over to the side, what's happening is teachers are writing your letters of recommendation according to the deadlines that you've got indicated, because you so helpfully added all your schools to the score list for applying. So they're working on your letters. They're going to upload it when it's done. You are going to get a little notification that, hey, Ms. Barkin has uploaded your letter of recommendation, and you'll know it's there. Then what is going to happen is your counselor is also going to be using all the information you submitted to craft a wonderful, fantastic letter of recommendation for you. They are then going to submit your teacher letters, the counselor letter, the transcripts, whatever is required for that specific school. They're going to submit it by the deadline. Now, let's say everybody got all their stuff together except you, and we were all ready today. Are we going to send your stuff out today? No, we're not, because what we find is that that really messes things up at the college end. So we really try to wait until after you submit your application for us to add the rest of it, so that things get completed more quickly and matched up more quickly at the school. That being said, as we get very, very close to the deadline, so probably by the time we hit, why am I still on July over here, folks, on my calendar? When we get to about the Friday before November 1st, that's October 28th, I will tell these guys, just start submitting everything for everybody in there that has a November 1st deadline, because by the time the school gets to process it, your application's already going to be there, and then we'll know we met that November 1st deadline. And we're just going to keep pushing stuff out between October 28th and Tuesday, November 1st. So that's going to be what happens. When we get closer, we'll worry about the stuff that happens in January. But for those applying to many regular decision schools, know that I am going to be on you in December, because you need to get your requests in early, because nobody's little faces here is working over winter break sending out your application materials. So we get every one of those things out before we leave here for winter break. So I will send you, you're going to find over the next 4 months or 3 months that I send you a lot of email. I try to limit it. I try to bullet point it, and I try to make it really clear what you need to be doing and when you need to be doing it by. So that even if you don't come in and meet with all of us often, you've got a little guideline to keep you on track through the process. So what are some tips to making sure that this goes well for you? First thing I'll say is that all the things that you might be hearing from people about how awful the whole process is, how complicated, how crazy, it doesn't have to be that way. So it can be that way, but there are some things you can do to help yourself make it not that way at all. And so some of those things are really, following the directions that we put out for you and following the deadlines and guidelines and planning ahead. Communicating with your school counselor. I think those that are the most frustrated are the students and families that don't communicate with their counselor and don't communicate with me. And so they're like kind of just sort of struggling on their own. And they're the ones who get to the end and are probably the most dissatisfied with things because they felt like they were really lost. But if they had reached out, we would have been able to help more along the way. Reading your emails, school and personal. If you don't have time to read it then, like star it, put it in a folder, we tell students like anything that you get from me, like make a folder and just throw the stuff in there, because odds are pretty good that when it's like 3 a.m. and I'm actually not checking my email, that if you were to search your email, you would probably find the answer to your question. So hold on to that stuff. Get those schools on the applied list so that we send stuff out, especially those rolling schools. We're not planning on sending that stuff out until we know you applied to them. So you got to make sure you move them over to applied. If you're using the Common App, make sure you enter your Common App ID in SCORE. And we're going to remind students of that and go through that next week at the senior group, but it is very important. use the Common App Help Guide, use the other resources we've put together. That'll remind you of things like not entering teachers' email addresses on the Common App because we send everything in SCORE. And really just following the directions that are specific for each school. Finally, the other thing that's really important is that after a student submits their application materials, they are responsible for monitoring the application status. So we always recommend that students go in after they apply and they monitor the application status until they see that all of the parts are there. That being said, like the electronic scores, it's not instant. It usually takes about 2 weeks, sometimes more. BU was really stressing students out last year. It took more than 3 weeks to get everything there and to fill out the applications because they were just so inundated with materials. But there are ways, and we'll teach you how to check and score to see when we sent things so that you kind of have that confidence that everything was done on time. So again, parents, we really encourage you to encourage your child to be the one asking questions. While I talk to parents all the time, who I really want to talk to and who colleges really want to talk to and counselors really want to talk to is the student, especially for seniors, because parents, I can tell you that 12 months from now, that college will not talk to you. They'll take your check, they'll take your payment, but they're not talking to you about anything. So this is the time to encourage students to really advocate for themselves and learn how to ask for help, because they're going to need to do that when they get to college. So you want to give them ownership of that process and teach them, because if they don't learn how to, navigate these kinds of slightly difficult, procedural kinds of things, they're going to struggle when they get to college. Any of us parents who went to Rutgers know what that looks like, navigating bureaucracy. And these skills are really lifelong skills that they will use all the way through the future. Don't do things for your student, help them. When you do things for them, you're telling them that you're not confident in their ability to do it themselves. And if you're doing your child's application for them, you're really saying, I don't think you're capable of doing this. And if your student doesn't know what your address is, which is frankly the kind of stuff they're filling in on their application, then we have a much bigger problem in their preparedness for college. So let them do it, encourage them to do it. That being said, encouraging and nagging, there's a very fine line there. What I really recommend is that it will save your relationship at home if this doesn't become a daily thing. If this isn't all you talk about for the next 8 months, consider setting aside a specific day and time of the week where you're going to kind of recap and set goals for the week. And, for both of you, maybe Sunday night after dinner, and then kind of let it go. All the emails I send out, with lists of things, they go to both students and parents. So parents, check your email, give the kid a heads up that they need to check it, and kind of empower them to do that. Remind them to check their status. The other thing is really try to keep your stress level down, which will keep their stress level down. When something goes a little haywire, try to keep the reaction down. There are going to be bumps in the process. There are almost always bumps in the process. It doesn't necessarily mean someone screwed up. Just because, BU last year didn't have those things in there, didn't mean anybody in this building screwed up. We had everything out. We had records that everything were out. We work with the schools. We make sure things are going to get there. And we're here to support, the students through the process. So it's really important to kind of keep that level down a little bit. Remember that everybody involved in this process are humans. And we're all really trying to do the best we can. And do right by everybody's, all of our students, and getting everything out in time. So kind of keep that in check. And again, encourage your child to email and visit their counselor for help. So now we've talked about our school counselors, who they are, what their names are. I've kind of got them up there. What we will be doing next is, rather than doing a big Q&A here, we're going to split down into Google Meets in just a couple seconds. If you go back to the email that Ms. Smedley sent today, it has the links in there for where each and every one of those groups are going to be. I do have them coming up on a QR code slide, so you'll be able to scan them if you want to be able to just jump over to a Google Meet. Counselors, if you guys want to start popping off and go ahead and getting yourselves in a Google Meet, that would be great. Go ahead and do that. Give them a second to get themselves set up over there, and then you can hop over into there. They'll introduce themselves, take Q&A for a little while. Just one other thing I want to talk about this. So like, where do I fit in this process? You know, I joked that I have the A through Z caseload. So I work with all of our students. So students, yes, you do still need to work with your counselor. All of that stuff that I talked about that's happening, like they're the ones doing that. I'm backing them all up to further guarantee that we don't miss anything amongst all of our students, but they're doing all that work. So you've got to stay in touch with them. You can't avoid them. You got to work with them. What am I doing? All kinds of random things. So I do meet with students individually. I have not started that yet. I will probably start meeting with students hopefully late next week. Once we get our college visits and our senior groups kind of up and running, I'll start doing individual visits. I will email out the procedure for scheduling an appointment with me. So a lot of times then I am working on building or refining a college list, kind of looking at applications with students, reviewing activity lists, all things like that. I will help students do the FAFSA, understand their aid packages, mock interviews for students who need to do that. Talked about essay review, I do that. There are lots of other individual things we'll be doing from now on. So I said, we're going to start with senior groups. We move into individual meetings with the counselors. I've got appointments available. I run workshops for students, drop-in times where they can come in and work on applications. And students have told me in the past that was probably like the most helpful thing I ever did, would be like, all right, well, during all lunch periods, like this room is going to be open and I'm going to be in there. So come in and work on your applications. And they like bring their lunch, bring a computer, come with their friends. They help each other. They're super productive. I did that last year. I did that after school as well. So that can be something that's really supportive for students to get them through the application process, and basically just like a whole bunch of other things to make sure that you get to the other end. Lots of short videos out there if that is what works for you as well. All right, so with no further delay, we're going to go ahead and we're going to move on to those other groups. Mrs. Sarah and Mr. Projan, you want to log off and get into your Google Meet so that they can get into their Google Meet. And then I'm going to hop off and get into my Google Meet so people can get in there too. So have a wonderful evening. For those that I don't see again, we're going to go ahead and we're going to end this and move on into our Google Meets. Thanks.